Prologue. Othaashle. Circa 7 years, 2 months, until projected exodus date. Circa 14 hours since the assassination of rebel leadership. Othaashle Mistari, champion of the Amaya and first of the redeemed, smiled as she stopped before the door to her office in Miatafamwanga's high command building and punched in her passcode. She had only returned yesterday from breaking the rebel leadership, but prided herself on how much she could accomplish in a 40-hour day. The binders and folders under her arm were the results of months of preparation, and she was eager to get started on them. The electric door hissed as it slid open, and Othaashle frowned beneath her mask at the two unexpected individuals waiting inside her office. Beyond them, her adjuncts, Itese and Indlova, waited with Taizak, one of the redeemed she often tasked with training and orienting new additions to their ranks. Epikoro, Mnene, Othaashle said, stifling a sigh as she strode into her office. This is unexpected. Othaashle walked over to her raised desk and set the folders down, then pressed the button that lowered the surface to the seating height she'd programmed into it. She remained standing as she did so, studying Mnene and the redeemed. Mnene Folonia was one of Vizier Skadetha's people, a tall, handsome Samyati with a full gem crest sparkling at his brow. His mask hung at his waist, clipped to a thick belt he wore over stiff red trousers. A long coat reminiscent of a military uniform complemented that, and several medals shone over both sides of his chest. Othaashle frowned under her mask at the color. She understood the need for a uniform appearance in the military, but she'd never understood red for the Amaya Samyati personnel. It worked on some of them, but Mnene's particular coloring did not mesh well with the Amaya scarlet. Mnene wasn't on duty, and therefore not required to wear a uniform or anything resembling it, but he was a career soldier. Othaashle imagined he would feel as uncomfortable without a uniform as she did. Beside him, Epikoro stood tall and imperious, wicked silver antlers reaching even higher than Mnene's. Othaashle's fellow redeemed scanned the room from beneath their Mamotabor-styled mask, arms folded over their chest. Their uniform was pristine as always, and the light flooding in from Othaashle's window that overlooked the city made their armor shine bright. Othaashle did not want either present as she discussed her plans, and while Mnene didn't look too comfortable, few did in the presence of so many redeemed, even Skadetha's people. Epikoro's posture indicated they wanted something. Once Othaashle's desk was at the proper height, she sat. Indlova walked over, beaded braids clicking as they swished with her step, and set down a cup of steaming tea. Othaashle wobbled her head at her adjunct, smiling beneath her mask, and brightened her clear nodes in a moment of indulgence. She breathed in deep, filling her head with the blend of cinnamon, cloves, lemon peel, and the black tea leaves, a mix called Scarlet Delight after the color of the brew when seen in a glass rather than a mug. Othaashle smiled. No honey to cut the bite or distract from the natural taste. She'd had a cup of tea before leaving her rooms this morning, as she did most days. It was easier to drink without her mask in the privacy of her rooms, but that was one of the plain, standard fare distributed to everyone. The cup before her was also hot enough that Othaashle had some time to get to Epikoro and Mnene out of here before it would be too cool to drink. Glancing around the room, Othaashle noticed that everyone except Epikoro and Mnene had a beverage nearby. Her enhanced senses confirmed another cup of Scarlet Delight for Itese and Kafa for Indlova and Taizak. Did they refuse? Or was there no offer? She would have to speak to Indlova and Itese about that. Though she appreciated their little dig at the uninvited guests, it wasn't polite or befitting their stations. "What can I do for you, Mnene?" Othaashle asked, sitting up straight in her chair. "Or did Epikoro bring you here rather than serving as your escort? I have much to do today for the redeemed and the Amaya now that the rebels have been broken." "Not all of us think that." Othaashle raised an eyebrow beneath her mask, studying her former friend, the fourth most senior of the redeemed. "Oh? Why would anyone think otherwise? She leaned back, gesturing to Menene. I followed the informant's coordinates, found the meeting, waited long enough to confirm their intention of uniting the factions, then eliminated their leaders and finest warriors. With their leadership wiped out all at once, they will either turn to infighting or waste away. Any groups that poke their heads out will be easily dealt with. Epicoro rolled their shoulders, fixing Othaashle with their masked gaze. You may have wiped out their leadership and eliminated the 2 knights they had, but who knows what else they've been hiding. 2 of Quashrima's knights fought for them. Did they train other knights? Maybe the ones you believe you broke will come out of hiding once they hear of this attack. And how exactly would they hear about it? Indilova asked. It's not as though the rebels have some sort of weekly news bulletin they can send out. Assuming those knights are still alive, unless they've been hiding on Lightside this whole time, there is no way for them to reach the rebels without leaving themselves exposed. If they did come out of hiding, they would lead our patrols to their bases, and we could eliminate them before they even had a chance to be a threat. It seems almost like you want the rebels to have something up their sleeve, Epicoro, Itese said. Do you know something that we don't? That would explain Menene's presence. It was his informant that had given them the details about the meeting. Othaashle still didn't know why Skadatha had allowed him to bring her the lead, instead of taking it for herself. Her best theory was that the Vizier had hoped the knights might kill her for once, but that was too short-sighted for Skadatha. I'm sure that whatever Epicoro and Officer Felonia know, Tyzok said, voice pleasant as usual, they will share with us. The Redeemed are the Amaya's greatest asset, after all, and we need to act as one to succeed. Nene's eyes went wide at Tyzok's voice. Though he quickly looked away, Othaashle caught the expression and gritted her teeth beneath her mask as she glared at him. She'd recognized that look. Menene knew Tyzok. Skadatha's officer was now trying to place his voice, if he hadn't already. That was forbidden. How dare he know more about one of my people than I? Othaashle clenched her fists. This must mean Skadatha knows too. Or she will know. Nothing I can do about that. Scarlet Light, does that mean she knows who I... Othaashle blinked, trying to remember what she'd been thinking about. She glanced up at Epicoro and thought for a moment. Right. Well, Epicoro, stop wasting my time. What information do you have that you think warrants further use of resources against the rebels? Epicoro nodded toward Menene. Rather than requesting extraction, Menene's contact within the rebels has shared the location of one of their bases. Silence hung, and Menene, lost in thought for some reason, took a moment before he looked to Epicoro. The Redeemed was waiting on him to speak. Yes, my informant believes that if we eliminate the space, it will not only cripple the rebels' georural production capabilities, but work with the elimination of the leadership to spur infighting. And what do they stand to gain from that? Othaashle asked. My informant believes that they will be able to seize control of the various factions in the chaos, Menene explained. I believe they think this will allow them some sort of elevated position within the Amaya. Epicoro stepped forward. Instead of that, I believe we should eliminate the base, then hunt down the rest, including this spy. We can get the locations of the other bases from their records, or extract it from their people, and be done with these rebels for good. Othaashle frowned beneath her mask. There was no logical reason to oppose Epicoro's suggestion. But what do they want? A recent divide had formed within the Redeemed. Most didn't notice it, but Othaashle saw Epicoro's hand at work. They had grown more outspoken about the Redeemed taking a more active role in the Amaya, about doing away with some of their taboos. Othaashle agreed with the first part, not the second. The God King had made them this way for a reason. While Othaashle hoped for a reconciliation with her former friend, Epicoro grabbed for every bit of power they could among the redeemed, and while Othaashle did not care for political games, she knew their importance and would not relinquish her responsibility to another. Do they want me to come with them? To leave Mutafamonga just as I seek to put my plans into motion? Or do they want me to deny them and let Skadatha take over? Othaashle gritted her teeth. Menene's presence here made that possibility all too likely. If Epicoro was willing to give power to Skadatha in a matter like this, then reconciliation was even farther away than she'd thought. Are you so eager to find more souls worthy of redemption, Epicoro? Othaashle asked. I agree that we should seek to fill Makala with as many candidates as possible, but we would need to vet this information as we did the last tip. I can take care of that, Indalova volunteered. I would like more information on this informant anyway. Maybe we could— I'm not afraid of rats hiding in caves, Epicoro spat, turning toward Indalova. They looked back to Othaashle. You brought back only one knight when there were two. Othaashle shrugged. Cave-ins are less accurate than a blade. Her soul would have passed on in the time it would have taken to dig her out of the rubble. Epicoro grunted. It's still a mess that needs to be cleaned up. One the redeemed are suited for above all others. Othaashle thought for a moment, scanning the room. Indalova and Itese held their tongues, but their postures remained hostile. Tyzak and Menene both looked extremely uncomfortable. What do they gain by pushing me toward this decision? Othaashle glanced from Epicoro to Menene in time to see the officer glance at Tyzak again, and that same expression came over his face. Recognition. Remember yourself, Menene, she said, controlling her thoughts as she stood. The redeemed are no one you remember. Our past lives have been cleansed by fire, redeemed in the God King's light. Othaashle kept an iron grip on her thoughts as Menene blinked, and Epicoro, Tyzak, and Itese all looked off balance for a few seconds. They hadn't been expecting the comment, and their minds wandered. It gave Othaashle a moment to breathe. That's what I need. I will have to send you to clean up the rebels alone, Epicoro, Othaashle said, weaving a thread of resentment into her voice. I have too much to do here, as I said. As Epicoro looked to her, cocking their head, Othaashle gestured between them and Menene. I want regular updates from you both, and I better not hear about any intel Skadatha receives regarding this that I don't. Understood? Menene gave a curt nod. Understood, Mastari. She looked to Epicoro. Do you need anything else? Epicoro studied her for a moment, then adapted a satisfied posture. Will you require requisition paperwork for the gem braces? Othaashle shook her head. I'll let the armory know. 3 should be enough. Eliminate them quickly, but take time to wait until Aurora Day if you need to replenish your Aurora Light instead of returning here. You're dismissed. Epicoro strutted out the door without waiting for Menene. The officer almost glanced at Tyzak again before remembering himself and following after. Othaashle waited for 6 breaths after the door hissed and slid shut behind them, then looked to her adjuncts and wobbled her head. That should give us some time to figure out what to do about them. I don't want things to come to a head if we can avoid it. With all due respect, Mastari, Tyzak said, lifting his mask up just enough to take a sip of his kaffa. That may no longer be a possibility. I believe Epicoro was ready to take that proposal to Skadatha if you refused them. They could have delivered the intel from the informant himself. Menene's presence was unnecessary for anything other than a reminder of the vizier. Othaashle smiled beneath her mask. Tyzak doesn't miss much. Be that as it may, I do want to find common ground with Epicoro if I can. They were a friend once, and they are still a great asset to the Redeemed and the Amaya. A strange chill ran through Othaashle, making her frown. The Redeemed needed to be united. It was the Amaya's unity that had allowed it to succeed over those who had opposed them, a union in name only. That was why she had gone personally to eliminate the rebel leadership. The idea of redeeming their knights had been part of it, but the threat of a unified rebellion had required her personal attention. Othaashle took a deep breath, shaking herself back to the present. She looked to her adjuncts and stood, holding the folders and binders toward them. "I want you two to work on these," she said, handing them their respective stacks. "Plans to expand the role of the redeemed within the Amaya, and ideas for us to take on a more public role in the preparations for Exodus. Review them and let me know if you have any questions." Both adjuncts nodded as they accepted the files and binders. Indlova stopped back at her desk to drain her tea, and Itese took her kaffa with her as she strode out the door with Indlova. Othaashle looked after them, then took a seat. She lifted her mask enough to take a sip of tea, brightening her clear notes to savor the hot, spiced liquid for a moment, then turned to Tyzok. "I assume you wanted to hear about the progress of our newest recruit, Nastari?" Tyzok asked, approaching her desk. Othaashle nodded. "He hasn't even had a full day to acclimate. Still, he's taking to things rather quickly. I have him getting settled in his rooms for now, reading over basic materials before I review them with him." Othaashle wobbled her head. "Good. He shouldn't be needed for fighting anytime soon, but we still need to be prepared for anything." Tyzok nodded. Othaashle thought for a moment, then leaned forward, resting her arms on her desk. "I have something else I would like you to do that may get in the way of some of Katamori's training. Give him what he needs for now, of course, but after that, how well do you know those that have taken a shine to Epicoro recently?" "You want to see if I can win them back over?" "Your reputation for being good with people is why I had you take over training of the new recruits. Back when we had more than one of those, at least." Tyzok stood in silence for a moment, then wobbled his head. "If you'll allow it, Mistari, I think I might be able to do that while handling Katamori's orientation." Othaashle wobbled her head, leaning back in her chair. If things with Epicoro don't end up working out, Tyzok would be a welcome replacement. "Tell me what you have in mind."